Welcome to the Ignite Podcast, where we introduce thought leaders and subject matter experts that you'll want to consider for your next corporate event. Now, here's your host, Dennis Worden.
I'd like to welcome to the Ignite Speaker Podcast a good friend and René Rodriguez. René, I'll never forget that first time we met, and you talked to us about the science of the neuroscience of speaking and communication, and I thought, I can never learn this. And then as I spent time with you and heard you speak, and it's just been and not just an amazing relationship, but to see the impact that the message you have, how it's impacted lives. And over the years, I mean, you've spoken for some pretty incredible companies, from Coca-Cola here in Atlanta to General Mills to Wells Fargo to Cargill. I mean, you could go down the list of maybe who's who. And so just first off, it's just great to have you on the Ignite podcast.
It's great to see you as well, Dennis. So, wish it was under better circumstances. Always much better to be in person, but we'll do with this for now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, in fact, I wish it was on your boat, and I wish it wasn't snowing in April, in Minnesota. But that's such is life there. But let's talk a little bit before we get into some questions. Just about this. The methodology that you have through just your history, your background, your understanding of neuroscience, and kind of breaking down barriers and really communicating with attendees at an event or in a workshop that literally, as I've experienced personally, is life-changing.
Yeah, I think that one of the greatest parts of being a human is being able to have an idea, sharing the idea, and watching people make a shift because of that idea. And conversely, I think one of the hardest parts about being in the human experience is having an idea, a thought, and nobody listening. And so I think there's a lot of inherent fulfillment and passion in watching ideas come to life and watching somebody who didn't know that there's an actual science to the process of communicating and influencing, persuasion, speaking, however you want to call it, and watching them take those ideas and influence people with them, for whether it's a parent, the teacher, or sales professional, executive, you name
it. As you have such a grasp and understanding of it, this is as you mentioned, it's a crazy time, but some of us are fortunate to work from a home office, as I have for probably the last 20 years, as in consulting and involved in working with speakers around the United States. But for many, number one, working from home, that's something that's adding new stress to their life. Maybe, less income coming in than they've had, up to this point in time. And so they're going through some financial stress. Like, there's just a lot of stress going on. And talk to us about how to handle that, and how to manage the stress, and how really to come out of this a better person.
What's really interesting is we talk about change and people resisting change, but really the thing we don't like about change is the stress that it causes us. And you look at public speaking, why people are scared of it. It's because of stress. It's because if you want to lose weight and we want to change our diet, we don't like doing that because of the stress it causes us. We are biologically designed to avoid stress for a good reason. And one of the things we do is try to help people understand why that's the case. Now, that's not a new idea. That's been around for, 60 years. I've been studying it for 23 years myself. And now thinking about how do you understand that, take that understanding and apply it to communicating, to leading, to things. And I think the thing that I would tell people is that if it was a lesson that was given to me, is if you can't utilize the tools that you've been taught while under stress, then the tools are worthless. And because you watch people who are really good people go under stress and they become mean people that are liars, or that are truth tellers, start to lie. And leaders who are great and have great stories begin to crumble and dismantle just under stress. And so it is critical in leadership. It is critical in parenting. It is critical in anything that you do, any profession that you're in, to be able to manage how it is that you deal with stress and develop tools and methods to be able to go through it. And you'd asked, what's the best way? Well, I always look to who are the elite of the elite, meaning the ones that are under the highest amount of stress and that still perform. And you look at people like Navy SEALs or professional athletes. They share one common tool, is they are masters of breathing. They are masters of understanding that stress is a biological, physiological response to some external stimulus, and they need to perform. And they've done the practice, they've done the things that they need to do. And now it's not a question of know-how, it's a question of will they perform now? And will their bodies perform? Will their minds perform? And the only bridge between that stress response, heightened stress response that is debilitating versus the right amount of stress, which becomes high performing, is breathing. And they use a technique called box breathing, which would be 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds out, hold 4 seconds, and repeat that process. And the psychology, the neurology behind it is pretty interesting, which is you have two different nervous systems. You have the parasympathetic and you have the sympathetic, and those are antagonistic. They cannot function at the same time. And so when you have a stress response, like let's say you're a Navy SEAL and someone's shooting at you, trying to kill you, that's a sympathetic nervous system response, or what Dr. Daniel Kahneman calls System 1. And that System 1 response is designed to protect the fight, flight, freeze response, or reptilian brain, lizard brain. All sorts of names have been given to this over the years. And it's all the same function of just trying to survive. And if you're in a battle, if you're on a football field and someone's trying to kill you on the football field, or you're in baseball about to swing a bat and there's a 90-mile-an-hour fastball coming at you, your body responds the same. And those who perform at an elite level are able to manage the stress in that time. And so breathing is the number one skill.
So I'm curious, René. This podcast goes out to several thousand of our contacts that we work with regard not just to public speaking, but that are business people. And so let's bring that down to a practical level. How does somebody deal with it personally, going through this COVID-19, lockdown? How can I apply that personally? And then how do I apply that as a leader with those that I have the privilege of leading?
The number one task of leadership is self-awareness. That is the number one skill set that defines a good leader. Understand where they are. They understand how they respond to stress. They understand where their body language is. If they're, they're super self-aware. And I would also caution you that the scariest individual is the one that says they're super self-aware. Now, I'm very self-aware. The moment we tell ourselves that is the moment we cut off other potential feedback that maybe there's some things that we're missing. And so self-awareness is key. We go back to emotional intelligence, which is three things. It's the ability to understand where I'm at emotionally, being able to understand where my audience is emotionally, and then having the skill set to adjust my approach to best suit and to best be able to communicate and connect. And so self-awareness is a really, 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 really big key. And so then I would go into then two is understanding this concept of frame. Frame is the window that we see the world and how we understand the world. We can, if I were to say to you, what's the first word that comes to mind when I say used car salesman? Typically people say very negative things, sleazy, slime bag. And those are frames of reference when you just say a word. And when we look at this world, we can describe this as COVID-19, the pandemic of 2020, and all of a sudden it just starts creating this frame and this negative sort of connotation. Or we can choose to identify this as a pause button in our life. And tragic for some people, and yet we're still trying to figure out what the end result of this is going to be. So it is a time of uncertainty. But there are so many times of uncertainty, just like the seasons of life, winter, spring, summer, fall. These are things that go. And so then how you frame this for yourself, how you describe this scenario to yourself is going to determine how you look at it. And so you could look at this as the end all be all of the end of as we know it. Or you can look at this as an interesting time to force you to learn new skills. And when you as a leader understand how you are going to be able to, then you can then help others control and manage and claim that frame of how things are. And so I watch some of the best leaders go out there and say, all right, guys, different times, but you know what? We've been through things like this before. So here's what we're going to do. And there's a voice you can hear in their tone that this is okay. There's the confidence in the body language and everything is just exudes confidence. And we know the economy runs on confidence, and people's confidence is driven and usually lighthoused, if you will, by leaders. And so leaders create such a critical role right now in how they respond. I can't tell you how many friends and colleagues I have sent private messages to saying, hey, is your last post contributing to fear, or is it helping? Are you leading into hope, into something more positive? And it's a really, really interesting time. And in fact, if we want to talk about this thing I have behind me here, the Courage Scale is a great frame to understand where people are at.
Yeah, let's do that. But before we do that, let me follow up that comment with a question with regard to, so we're going through it, we're discovering how to handle fear, etc. But then on the other side, as we come through this time, you and I have talked about it, I'm big on, what's your purpose in life? How do you fulfill? So as we go through it, I know Gail and I, when we go out for our walks now in the evening, we're talking about, what do we want to be different when we come out of this than we had going into this? And so, so what would be your comment with regard, now that when we come out on the other side, what do we want to have learned, and what do we want to put into practice, perhaps in our lives or in our leadership?
Well, I want to first point out the fact that you even asked yourself that question. So many people won't ask yourself that question. And the questions that we ask ourselves dictate the frame that we're in. And, how are we going to survive creates a frame, versus how do we want to be different as a result of this creates a completely different frame. The question is so powerful. And so I would say, make sure that people are really paying attention to what questions and thoughts are running through their minds, what posts they're putting out there, what's the language that they're using, because language creates such a picture and creates such an emotional picture for people. And so I think that, having this time, some people would say this is the winter of our lives. This is the tough time, right? I mean, I think we both come from some of the same background here, Dennis, and understanding that in the winter time, Jim Rohn said that it's our time to do three things: get better, stronger, and wiser. And if we do that, if we get better, stronger, and wiser during a time that most people are sleeping and hibernating, I mean, what a great time to grow while others are sleeping. If you're in a competitive environment, what a great time to take market share. What a great time to stand out and lead. I've said this many times, that this market has revealed so much of people. And as Emerson says, that adversity does not build character, it reveals it. And this has revealed that there's a lot more comedians than there are leaders out there. And it's been frustrating. I mean, all the jokes, which are great. I love comic relief. I love the beauty of humor to an extent. And then it's sometimes, and if you're trying to be a leader, and I look at your posts online and all I see are joke after joke after joke, then we know who you are, and don't expect us to follow you when this is over. But it's the time now to start speaking loudly about what we see and leading into something.
That's great. Good advice. Thanks, Renee. Let's refer to the board behind you, because I've watched your podcast and gone through the talking to giving and giving to talking and the courage zone. Why don't you share with us a little bit and our listeners about that?
Well, when this all happened, the scale is something we've used for 18 plus years, and but when this all came down, we kind of sat down and we said, okay, so this is going to be different. I do close to 100 events a year, and we watched them all go away, if not canceled, to at least rescheduled. And it was fascinating to say, okay, so are we going to start monetizing an online business? And so we decided to get together and create content, but then something wasn't right inside. There was something that was missing. And the thought of charging and trying to monetize at this point felt, so somebody said, describe it. And I said, well, imagine if you're inside and you feel safe and you have this beautiful boat sitting next to the front door, and outside there's a flood and you see people drowning. Is that the time to start thinking of a monetization strategy of your boat? Or do you just get in the boat and go help people? And that's how I look at this. Is not saying that I have the boat to help everybody, but I do have a skill set. And like everybody listening here has a skill set. And I think part of the journey of life is identifying what is your skill set and how do you offer it to the world? And in a business environment, to monetize that. But in a crisis, how do we just get in the boat and start helping people? And when I looked at that, it was really clear to me that we really need to start helping people frame what's happening, to give people a coping method to deal with the stress, and then to really start challenging leaders to step into their their influence, into the influence that some of them forget that they have. And so that, I wanted to put this out. This is what we call the courage scale. And the courage scale was developed by Dr. David Hawkins many, many years ago. He was a world famous psychiatrist and medical doctor and psychologist, and passed a few years ago. But just a brilliant man. He was actually my mother's neighbor for many years in Sedona, Arizona. And what he did is he created a scale. We kind of adopted it to make it more business friendly. And he took these different states of being here. And I don't know if you can read them or not, but he assigned a logarithmic number to them, saying how much energy or vitality was given off when you're in that state of being. And so when you're looking at death is at 0, I guess that makes sense. We're not real influential when we're dead. But shame and guilt at 20 and 30 made a lot of sense, because all my coaches use shame and guilt to try to motivate me. You suck, run faster. And I'd try to run faster and dribble the ball off my foot. And then it never really helped. And I don't think many of us feel real energized when we're shamed and guilted. But then apathy 50, grief 75, fear 100, anger 150. That made a lot of sense to me, because we love working with anger groups, people that have energy there. And in fact, that didn't make sense to me, because I was thinking, I'd rather feel apathetic than to be crying, scared, and angry. And he said, René, think about it for a minute. You can take an apathetic person and walk them over to a bridge and throw them over, and they don't care. But you take an angry person and walk them over to a bridge and try to throw them over, and they're going to try to fight you back, because there's energy there. That's when it made sense, because it's so close to this line of 200, which is this line of courage. And this courage line is a dividing line between what we call the taking or the giving side of life and the taking side of life, where you look at people that live the majority of their life below this line into fear, anger, grief, apathy, guilt, shame. All of these things immediately suck the energy out from underneath you. And you could be having a great day, and that person calls you on the caller ID, and you just see their name, and you just like, ugh. Immediately you just feel the energy sucked out of you. And so you look above the line into openness, willingness, reason, logic, joy, all these wonderful things. And you can be having a horrible day, and that person calls you, and all of a sudden you feel great. And so what we tell people is that, are you above the line or below the line? Is your communication above the line, below the line? Is your body language above the line or below the line, right? What's happening, and how do you control these things to deliver the right message and start really, truly leading? And I tell people, use this as a filter to what you're posting. If you're posting something without doing a fact check, just slow down and take a deep breath, right? Let's not, are we doing something to get likes and shares because we're looking for that kind of attention, or are we doing something to help inspire something? So that's where this comes from, and why I think it's such a critical tool for a time like today.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of like our friend, Tim Sanders, his book, Love is a Killer app, talked about abundance versus scarcity. You've got giving versus taking. And what do you want? What do you want to do? You want to have open hands? So you made a good comment there about, and Ignite, working with other speakers, we've said the same thing, asked ourselves the same question with regard to, what do we just give? Because, in your case, you have such incredible content to be able to help people walk through this storm. At the same time, you need to generate revenue to keep the lights on. So how does a business owner be abundant at the same time, continue to keep revenue coming in?
There's no one answer to all, but I'll tell you how we're looking at it. And we looked at it and said, the people that need these skill sets are not probably not the people that have ready cash available right now. They're the people that are struggling, that are scared, the ones that feel like they can't breathe. Those are the ones that need this. And so we just need to get this out to the world. Yeah. And there's going to be a small select few people out there. They're going to want to take it deeper, or maybe really have the cash reserves and have the money there, or maybe even have the vision to say, now is the time to start growing. Those are the people that will seek us out and that we'll work with. And those are the people that we can, build and structure conversations with. And so to me, it's different for every business. I will tell you this though, if you're in a sales environment, this is the time to start calling and getting on the phones with people. This is the time to increase the number of dials that you make on a daily basis. If whatever it is, increase and identify that sales activity and double, if not triple that activity, because I guarantee you right now, your competitors aren't doing that. Yeah. They're just not doing it.
Yeah. I think, René, too, in the whole aspect of, this is something that should be a lifestyle with us, right? It's like, gee, if all of a sudden I start getting calls from people that they haven't talked to me forever, and now they're calling me saying, hey, Dennis, how are you doing? You doing okay, buddy? Well, yeah, I'm doing fine, but I haven't heard from you in 4 years, on that. So we need to practice this kind of, and maybe that's something we come out of this with, is how do we build relationships that, and yet, not become, where we're just, in somebody's face all the time, but to
Yeah.
be real. And so I think that that's a good takeaway for me is from even our conversation is just the value of relationships and really caring, and then and showing that not just when we're going through an epidemic or a pandemic like we are now, but just life.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because it's true. Right now, you're going to know if you have relationship equity or not.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to draw upon some equity that you thought you had built, and people are like, "Hey, I haven't heard from you in forever. Why are you calling me now?" Then when's the best time to prepare for this? It would have been 2-3 years ago to
Yeah.
build that relationship equity right now and to do this. And if you don't have that, because and admittedly, I'm not a great communicator when it comes to reaching out and marketing and doing things like that. I'm trying to learn it. And so that was another reason why we're not trying to ask for something, because I've never asked for anything online before. So why would I just start right now? And so I knew that I had to start building some equity as well. I got to start giving into this and building something first. And that's a good equation in the world. If you want something, you first got to start giving.
Yeah.
And so, if I were to be really honest, I think that's another big driver as to why we are giving so much away. But the other relationships that I do have relationship equity. And those are the ones that I can call in and say, and usually if you have the right equity, it's a conversation of saying, "Hey, how can I add value? My business has changed. But the value equation hasn't." That's the cool part. The value equation hasn't. Is if it costs more to do business with me than not, then you won't do business with me. But if doing business with me makes you money, then there's a great exchange. Can we try to figure out how I might be able to bring value to you? And now all of a sudden, people start thinking, they say, absolutely. In fact, I can't tell you how many people are saying, quietly, "Renee, I'm so glad this happened because now you have free time to work with us." And that, though, there's going to be a few relationships like that. But to everyone else, if you're a solopreneur, if you're an entrepreneur, you got to start calling people, having that conversation of how can I add value for you in a way that we can exchange money for it.
Yeah.
And if you haven't done that before, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And then guess what? This is the lesson. That's the bed you made, and you got to sleep in it. But now's the time to change that. How do you start going out there and adding real value? And for other people, whether it's sales leaders, if you're running a team, sales meetings are going to be critical. And I'll tell you another piece, that if you're running sales meetings, look at your digital body language, look at digital culture. What does that mean? I can't tell you how many times you watch people and, the camera comes to them, they're here and they're just a little part of the screen. If I was just way down in this corner, my head down here, versus, sitting up straight in the camera, having good lighting, having maybe a visual, using your hands. This is what we call the influence zone, versus, "Hi, my name is Renee, and I'm really here to try to influence you. But if I'm using my hands and I'm doing things, all of a sudden now I'm catching your attention." I took a picture we were doing a Zoom call, and we had about 12 people on the call. And I told everybody to stop, and I took a screenshot of all of them. And you saw just some people, were here. Some people were like this. Right. And you had all these different looks. And I said, "All right, so we're going to try something." I said, "I want you to fill up the camera. I want you to lean in physically like you were in an actual meeting. And I want you to really engage." And you took the second picture and you watch those pictures side by side. And it looks like two different companies.
Yeah.
We can start looking at digital culture and our digital body language on how we're doing that. Making sure that you have a strong microphone. These are not expensive anymore, right? But they make a difference on what's going on. If we can't hear you, and if we're spending, what was that? I can't, what was that? What was that in the back? I couldn't hear. You're affecting the culture. And if you're leaders and some of your people don't have them, make the investment, buy them a microphone. It's not expensive, right? It's not expensive. It's worth it. And it just increases the value. It increases the culture. One of my clients actually is doing theme of the week, and they have to do a thing. And I looked at it and I said, "That's super cheesy." But then I looked at what they were all doing, and it was like everybody was having a great time, and they were having fun while building their business. And their theme of the week was, dress up like a cowboy. And so they'd all come to the meetings dressed as a cowboy or whatever it was. And it sounds dumb, but it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And it just brought levity.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of real creative things that you can start doing.
Oh, that's great. Even I've noticed in the neighborhood, but as we go out for a walk, we're being pulled together as neighbors and we're starting to communicate. We're doing social distancing, but we're starting to communicate. How does a leader in the social distancing time, and part of it's what you called, already spoke to with regard to using digital technology, but how does a leader in the social distancing time um, really keep her or his employees, team members feeling connected, like you are part of the team?
There's a lot of things you can do. One is making personal phone calls, getting on the Zoom call, getting a face-to-face FaceTime, and asking the question, how you doing? And then listening after you ask that question. And you're probably going to listen to things that you don't want to hear, but you need to listen. Because sometimes people just need to talk to somebody of influence around how they're feeling. And if they don't feel comfortable talking to you, then we know where the problem is, right? We got to begin there. You got to make people feel comfortable sharing what's going on. And if you believe that emotions have no place in this, then you don't understand life.
Yeah.
Life is about emotion. People make buying decisions based on emotions. People make hiring where they want to work and invest their time based on emotions. Discretionary effort, which is the measure of engagement, meaning you can make me come to work. It can be there for my 8 hours, but you can't control what goes on up here or what I do on my breaks or what I'm doing while I'm just relaxing on my couch. But because I'm engaged in the organization, if I start thinking about problem solving and creative ideas while I'm away from work, I'm an engaged employee. That happens through an emotional connection with my supervisor. And so this is a great time for supervisors to learn how to connect with people, learn listening skills, being able to repeat, hey, what I'm hearing you say is this. Is that correct? It's such a powerful phrase for people just to say, hey, what I'm hearing you say is this. And then saying, am I correct? And giving them a chance to either say yes or no. Those skill sets are critical in a time like this. And so I think it's also important to have a rotating lead of the meeting. Imagine if you knew that today was your meeting and before you were this person, right? But you can't be this person because you're leading. And all of a sudden it forces you to engage and you realize just how hard it is to get people to engage. And when you build that empathy with the leader, you're going to then say, I don't want them to feel the way I felt. So I'm going to really engage. And you have that rotating, leadership of that meeting, or at least a rotating presentation of some sort, teach us something. Now all of a sudden people know what it's like to get out there and they empathize with the importance of engagement.
That's good. I got a couple other questions I want to move on to, but before we do that, any last comments you would give to our listeners with regard to just this particular season, and that may encourage them in their leadership, but also encourage them. And I love what you said, at the beginning as we started. It's leadership, not just in the business. It's leadership in the home. It's leadership with the family. It permeates every area of our life. And as you and I, again, we talked about purpose. I always tie purpose to legacy, and I think a big part of a leader's legacy is going to be how they handle this type and this season. And when either my grandkids can point back and say, I remember when Grandpa, when we went through the pandemic of 2020, here's how he responded. Or our employees, our team members could look back and say, I remember how René held us together. And, and what an incredible legacy, but it helps them be able to face, as you said, again, the next winter that might be coming.
Yeah, in terms of this, and I'll say this, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. We're all going to be judged at the end of this, whether we were an alarmist, whether we were somebody who was apathetic, whether we were tone deaf to the realities that some people are really struggling with this, or whether we led, or were we just the comedian. Who were we? Because our brands are being created right now based on the behaviors that we have, because there's a sensitivity during crisis where people really pay attention to the behaviors of leaders, and how you behave is going to determine how people perceive you afterwards. So if you ran and hid, and then you come crawling out afterwards. We've seen the movies where the leaders and the war starts and they go hide, and the distaste and disgust we have for that leader that hid, and then they come out afterwards. So right now, if you're hiding, don't come out. We need you. Your people need you. Your kids need you. Your spouses need you. And so you will be judged. We will be judged in some way, shape, or form by the brand that we are creating right now.
So we have a lot of time on our hands. Well, more than, at least at home, more than we've had in the past, which is causing people, I mean, Netflix stock is way up. People are watching movies, and people are beginning to read actually again, I think. And I'm talking to more people that have, what have you read? What, and I'm asking. So my question, René, during this time, what are you reading? What are you feeding on that's helping you grow as a leader, and as a public personality speaker through this time?
Yeah, I think there's a big portion of my day that is just consuming and reading information that are things that are going to help me be better during this time. So I read books on body language, because your body language helps determine how you feel. A lot of times we went to how we think determines how our body acts, but it's also the other way too. We can change how we feel by our body. So body language is really important. Honing the craft. I think this has been big for me to understand the importance of audio and good video, and just being aware of things that I really wasn't aware of before. So those kinds of things. I'm, reading books that just are enlightening. And I made a post yesterday, and it talked about that we are the media now, and we are the media. And so no more complaining about the media. If there's something that is negative or doesn't add value, then let's starve that media from our attention. Let's not give it our attention, because our attention breathes life into the negative press. And in fact, let it starve while we give birth to something with hope and possibility. And so I look at who is giving something positive. I'm not talking Pollyanna, but I am talking about things that allow me to control my environment, allow me to inspire me to take the steps that I can take, and to create something. Because I know that if we stopped acting, then whether or not this is a problem or not, it will be a problem. And even if this is the worst problem, we still need to act. We still need to sell. We still need to lead. We still need to communicate. We still need to do those types of things, regardless of what's happening here. And so to me, I try to only consume things that are contributing to that. And I will tell close friends of mine, they send me things. I'm like, sorry, not interested. Love you, but not interested.
Yeah, good.
And it's just, I think Tom Hopkins back in the day used to say, bad seed, right? And what he was referring to was that people's ideas are planting seeds in us. And if it's a bad seed, just get that seed away from me. I don't want it. And it's not naivety. I'm very aware of what's going on. I do read what's happening, but I try to read from an objective, scientific perspective, not from a political perspective.
Good. We began by my sharing, some of the Fortune 500 companies you've had the opportunity to speak for, and some of the great workshops you do. The Amplify event is incredible. I think the next one is sold out, but there's one later in the year. Maybe, I think it's in Dallas. It maybe has still some openings. I would just highly recommend to anybody that's listening to this podcast to check out Amplify. And it is an incredible event. And as René will testify, I left there with my jaw down dropped. I learned so much, and I've worked with speakers all my life. So anyway, we talked about you as a speaker. What I'd like to, and we've really focused in on this time together, is how can we help those that we're sending this podcast out. But I really would like to wrap it up by asking you a question, René. I mean, you speak, not right now, but you speak, hundreds of times a year when you get out and you speak, and those audiences, whether it's 50 or 500 or 1,000, whatever that number is, what is it that René Rodriguez leaves that platform gets on a plane, flies back to Minnesota, and says, you know what, that was a win. But what makes that a win for you?
Well, first of all, thanks for the name Amplify, by the way. That is a name that you gave me. It's much better than what I was using before. So
thank you.
What the biggest win for me is that people got their life's worth out of the time that they spent. And so time to me equals life. And if they're going to invest their life with me, that they got something there that's tangible. And so there's nothing more valuable than somebody coming up 10 years later, and I've had this happen in places, and they pull out a card I gave them or a tool that they got from one of my workshops or one of my talks, and they keep it with them. That to me says that there was long-term sustainable value created. I think that there's a lot of speakers out there that use adrenaline, that use the short-term fast food, simple sugar, platitude advice. I'm sorry, I'm very opinionated on this, that lasts about as long as the seminar. And it feels great, and we get standing ovations because we're designed to get excited in those moments. But I like to get people to think, to ponder, to contemplate far beyond the workshop. Maybe lose a little sleep over the questions that we asked. The self-reflection, because that is what creates long-lasting change. That is what creates something that is sustainable. It may not, I may not be jumping around on stage, but your mind might be jumping inside, asking questions. Your team may be looking at things differently as a result of it. If I can create that kind of thought, that kind of reflection, something that is sustainable, and even more importantly, from a business perspective, that drives new, innovative revenue, something that can create the positive change, whether it be people re-fall in love with the company they were just at, or the leader takes a new approach to truly engage people and truly start listening to them, or a sales professional to hone their message in a way that comes from the heart, spoken in a sequence that the mind understands. Those kinds of things are the ones that really, really make for a valuable event.
That's great. I would, as we wrap up here, encourage those that are listening to the podcast to go to igniteadvisorygroup.com. And on our homepage, we actually feature speakers reel of René speaking, and you can get more information about, bringing René in for your corporation or organization once we're set free, and I would highly recommend René as a speaker for your organization. But René, in the spirit of really what we want to do, how can they connect with you today through LinkedIn, or how to hear on a daily or weekly basis from you? How can our listeners connect with you now?
For sure. Well, of course, obviously through your website. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, it's all See René Speak. My website is seerenespeak.com, SEERENE speak.com. We also, and Dennis, I'll give you the link if you want to throw it up on your website too. We created this thing called the Lighthouse Series, which is a collection of it's up to 6 videos now. We're going to be adding to it weekly, of videos that are just, and I'm not talking about free content. This is legitimate, full-on content that we used to sell for thousands of dollars. We're just giving it and creating it away. Things like this courage scale, but much deeper, going into a dissection of how the brain functions under stress to understand the behavior that we're in. So the Lighthouse Series, what we're calling it, is really trying to be a beacon of light during times like this. So the Lighthouse Series would be a good one. But go to seerenespeak.com, sign up. We'll send you a newsletter every once in a while that we're just learning how to do, when we're learning how to communicate better. But not pitching anything, just trying to stay in contact and actionable insights.
Great. René, thank you for carving some time out of your day to share about your insights and how we deal with stress. And as we've said, there's one thing to deal with stress now, but you and I are so much focused on the future and our purpose, and really you've shared with some great insights on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to work with you, my friend.
All right. Thank you much. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on today's Ignite Speakers podcast.